Mutant Year Zero is an amazing game. I've been reading through all the books and I adore it. It's not just great mechanics, which make the setting come alive. It's not just a great setting. It feels like 4 settings in one. But where the genius comes to me, which makes it so much more than the sum of its parts, is there are 4 core books that can be put together to kind of like create a huge story that players can unpack. And yeah, I'm really looking to get stuck into this. So this is Mutant Mondays, and we're going to be covering, this is just an introduction to Mutant Year Zero. So let's get stuck in. So I'm going to be covering the 4 core books, which is Mutant Year Zero, the core book. It is Genlab Alpha, Mechatron, and Elysium. I've read them all and I absolutely adore them. And what they do brilliantly is, apart from being standalone books that you could play by themselves for their own individual campaigns, they actually, if played together, they could almost create the story of the last days of humanity. And I just think that's super cool. They feel so different but can be put together, and it's done brilliantly. So over these series of videos, what I'm going to be covering is almost a how-to. I'm going to cover character creation, that side of stuff, the core mechanics, and a little bit of background on each book. And then I hope to run a mega campaign with all of them because I've adored them that much. So let's start with a bit of history. The Red Plague hits and it devastates the Earth. Within the first year, there's 1 billion dead. And any kind of alliances between countries swiftly disappeared. The world was already in trouble with wealth inequality and things going really wrong. But now it's a fight over the last dwindling resources. It's not long before nuclear war kicks in, and it just kills the entire Earth, or at least most of it. Mushroom clouds erupt from all over the world, and there's just devastation left. Everyone tries to save themselves. The rich and the powerful kind of band together, and they start to escape. Some escape under Earth, delve into kind of big bunkers under Earth. Others go under the ocean. Some escape into the space. And these are almost like the last lifeboats of humanity. Everybody's trying to get a lift, and it's the rich and powerful that create them, and countries no longer exist. It's these entities that get put together. So once it's all over, the Earth is still. Nature starts to claim back what was hers before we came along. Cities are overrun with wild mutated beasts, and plants claim back everything. And this is kind of the core of Mutant Year Zero. This is the zone. And at its core, it's a game of survival. And all of the books are a game of survival, but survival in different ways. But it's kind of much, much more than that. It's a search for hope. It is kind of telling a story before this brutal world probably swallows your character up. It's leaving a legacy for those that come behind you. And that's really, really cool. This is one of the best games I've read for a very long time, and it's because the story is so well put together, and it's paired with mechanics that literally make the setting feel alive. You are in a desperate fight to survive, and the mechanics give your player that sense of hopelessness, but also a sense of control. They can almost control when they succeed, but they're going to be succeeding at costs, and they have to make those decisions. And that really, really fits the setting. This Mutant Year Zero was the first book that the Year Zero engine was created in, and you can see it's just tailor-made for this setting. So the next video, I'm going to cover the core mechanics, the basics, because I think that's important to understand how they work before we cover character creation. But before we do that, a little bit extra background probably makes sense to put everything in order. So after this war, the world's in ruins, and these last lifeboats that escaped went on to become the Titan powers. And there were 3 main Titan powers. There was Elysium, and Elysium went underground. Their motto is tradition, resolution, and courage. And there's Noatan, whose motto is strength through unity, and they went under the ocean. And the last one was Mimir, whose motto was freedom and freedom for the future, and they went into space. Now, everything was going fine with these Titan powers. They were separate, they were living their own ways, but eventually jealousy kicked in. Humans being humans, they went to war again, and they destroyed what was left. And the beauty of, or one of the great things about these books is each of the books is touched by at least one of these powers. And by playing through the book, you kind of start to uncover the story, or the players start to uncover the story. And this links me on to kind of part one of what Free League do amazingly well. They help your players create characters, which is brilliant, and characters that can experience the world and play, and the mechanics that make it feel alive and make you feel like you're there, which is brilliant. But what they also do is they separate out your players from their player characters. And they do that by creating meta plots or meta games that they can play that actually impact the situation, impact the entire world, impact where they are. And that is played outside of their player characters, which is really cool. And by separating out the players, then they're happy for you as a player to actually discover the different bits of the world through the different books. So you don't, so as a player, you kind of uncover the history. Your characters won't necessarily know the entire history, but you as a player on this are getting these rewards by discovering all of the things and making sense of this world, which is super, super cool. So the zone is the base of all these books, in my opinion. It is a wasteland. It is surviving in a mutated, deadly world. It's about community, creating hope. It's such a cool concept. And this is where you start with Mutant Year Zero, the core book. And the other books tend to lead here, which is really, really cool, because what they do is as you play through the other books, the entities that you play, and we'll call them entities for now, end up kind of funneling towards the zone. And as they do that, they create more options for players to play. They create more history for GMs to use. They create more factions. They create more problems. And that just drip feeds more coolness into your campaign, which is amazing. So the 4 core books, we'll start with Mutant Year Zero. This is surviving in the zone. And the campaign in the background is finding Eden. Eden is this mythical place that may or may not exist. And within that game, what the players are trying to do as well is build an ark, which is a safe haven. And they get to control what kind of ark they're building. It's not their player characters that's building it. It's the players themselves, which again impacts how the world feels and how they interact with everything else around them. And within this game, they're playing as mutated humans, humans with mutant powers. The next book is Genlab Alpha. And again, in Genlab Alpha, you're trying to survive. And the campaign in the background is called Escape from Paradise. This is a paradise, but paradise is not always what it seems. The background game that kind of goes on within this as well as building a resistance. It is how you escape this terrible place. It looks good on the surface, but there's some dark stuff happening. So, which adds this kind of really cool background game that the players are actually trying to build a resistance outside of their characters as well. And what they do cool in this game is it's a GM versus players in this subsystem, but not in the game itself, which is brilliant. I think it'd be a huge amount of fun. And within this, you play mutated animals that have human capabilities, but they have been experimented on and they know what's going on, essentially. The next book is Mechatron. Again, within Mechatron, you're trying to survive, and the campaign in the background is the Ghost in the Machine. This is, you're playing as sentient robots, and it's a really interesting concept because I think in this book you're almost exploring what it is to be sentient and a human being by being the least human of all the entities you get to play in the game. And humans have essentially left all these robots to keep on producing for them, and they've not come back. And all of a sudden, these robots are starting to become sentient. Now, there's a danger in that because stranger danger. They want to get rid of anything that looks unusual. So there is this almost fight between sentience and trying to hide your sentience. And this world that you're in is decaying. It's running out of resources, and it's a fight against time. Now, the last one, I was unsure whether I would like it, because you're just playing as humans, but it's Elysium, and I adore this. The more I've read this, the more this has really, really kind of lit me up. Again, you're trying to survive, but survival is in a very different format. The campaign in the background is called The Guardians of the Fall, and your job in this is to protect your house. Your house is everything, and there are 4 main houses, and each of the players is in a different house, and you're playing as humans. You don't have special powers, but this almost feels like if you took Game of Thrones and mixed it with Cyberpunk and mixed it with Judge Dredd, it's a really, really cool setting. And it's heavily focused on politics and interplay and the game in the background. I didn't think I'd like the idea of players almost being against each other, but again, it's based in one of these sub games, not necessarily at the table. And the way they've done it with checks and balances, I think, is absolutely genius. And I think with the right group, it will be so much fun to play. And I'm really looking forward to playing this book. Now, all of the books have meta plots in the background, and they also have meta games. Maybe not so much Mechatron, but the meta games impact the world that you're playing in, impact how things are happening, and the players have that control over it. And the campaigns are very different to kind of like your standard follow this, then this happens. The campaigns are all about incidences, which brings me on to part 2 of what Free League do amazingly well. They give you tools to create the world. They give you tools to create incidents and problems and things that the players get to hit up against. And that is just brilliant. I love that as a GM. And you could pick almost any of these books and to a certain degree ignore the plot. Some of them, the plots are a little bit more important, but particularly with Core and Elysium, you could run campaigns for a very long time with minimal effort, and it would be interesting and it would be different every single time, which I love. And this brings me on to part 3 of what Free League do amazingly well, is they get you to focus not on prep, but on story, and not on story, but they give you tools to create stuff, not story. So the story happens at the table, but even the campaigns that they give you is not story as such. It's almost history made history made present, but it's about incidents, things that happen, and then the players have a choice of how they interact with it. There's not necessarily a fixed ending to nearly all of these incidents, and how the players interact with them makes the difference on what the campaign ends up like. So this brings on to point 4 of what Free League do amazingly well. Conversation is combat. So it's what I mean by this is it's not normally like you make a roll and then somebody does what you say. Having non-physical characters that play have such a big impact on the game, easily as much impact as having a physical character. Like, especially when you look at things like Elysium, where violence or straight violence isn't always the option. It's fine when it's somebody who's under you in society, but when you're dealing with those above you, conversation and that side of the game is so much more powerful. And there isn't such thing as dump stats. Everything matters. And because everything matters, it means players have to be so much more creative with their builds and how they approach stuff, and it gives them more options. And that's super cool. So I have a short attention span, and running all of these together for me just seemed like an absolute dream. It would keep me so entertained and focused, and I think you could run them in short series, like a season. And that is so appealing. Playing across these games with the right group would be just a whole bunch of fun. And I think almost like the complete tabletop role-playing experience, if there is such a thing. And what I mean by that is you have everything from combat to caring to politics to building, and not just building, a home base, but building a resistance, helping to build your house, and exploration, and all of those things wrapped in together, which I just think is, I haven't seen anything that ticked all of those boxes as well. They've even got a new skirmish game coming out, which is called Zone Wars, and this looks super cool because within Mechatron, and you actually have some mass combat rules, and they do this really well in the books in introducing new mechanics as you go, which gives you more tools to use. But this game looks amazing just as a standalone game. It looks super cool. I actually think it could be embraced into a campaign, which would be amazing. I'm really looking forward to getting a look at it. So what next? Well, next week I'm going to cover the base mechanics because I think it's really important to understand them before we start looking at character creation and the other games, because it will put stuff in kind of in perspective. We're going to do character creation, combat, basic stuff. So this will be things that you can show your players, but also as a GM you can look, understand and figure out whether you want to play the games. And essentially it's going to be almost, I'm going to try and do it as a player's guide because I'm going to want my players to watch it. So I'm not going to include loads of spoilers in it. I'll cover the outline of all of the books so you can see if you want to play any of them individually. And then I plan on running a monster campaign. If I I want to get the right group together, and I want to play through all of these in seasons. Now, luckily enough, there was an amazing group on Reddit, or amazing community on Reddit, which the link is below. And there's people on there that have put this all together. And I'm talking about you, Jeremy's brain. Thank you. There is documents where people have just pulled the ways that you can put this together into a mega campaign. And I've had a look through them. And then when I've read through the books, I'm looking at them again, and they're super cool. So there's links below to that community. And if you like this, make sure you subscribe, because there'll be more of this. And on Saturdays, there tends to be a video coming out, which is reviews of other modules and stuff like that. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and the next video will be on mechanics. So cool. And yeah, it's epic.